conviction to follow the teachings of the Savior that led him to do these things.
I know where I stand, and
Yes.
I know where my dad stood. Jesus Christ is the true author of liberty in every way that it can be. The fight for freedom is God's fight. So when a man stands for freedom, he stands with God. And as long as he stands for freedom, he stands with God. And were he to stand alone, he would still stand with God. A man will be eternally vindicated and rewarded for his stand for freedom.
This is Ben McClintock with Enoch Moore from defendingutah.org, and we are back on K-Talk Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com with the Liberty Line Naked Truth segment, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. Jim DeBacchus, the state senator from Salt Lake, tweeted about these two bills. He says, "Ignore extremists. Kids are not cattle, not owned by parents. Yes, mandatory vaccination, school attendance, not hard decision." Okay, so you're an extremist if you don't think that kids aren't owned by government. So if you think that kids are actually, part of a family unit, that they're the stewardship of parents, then you think that children are cattle. And because the accepted opinion is that your children belong to the government. You've got Hillary Clinton saying it takes a village to raise a child, and you've got the MSNBC saying that we need to get rid of this notion that children belong to parents and realize that they belong to whole communities. So these are some things that are going on in the legislature that we need to understand. We've got Thara on the air, on the line now. Thank goodness. Thank you for my wonderful call screener taking care of that. And Thara, are you there?
I'm here, thank you.
Oh, great. I'm so glad that worked for us. Okay. Thanks for having us on. Now, am I pronouncing your name right?
Thara, yes.
Thara, great. Okay. Wanted to thank you for coming on. I know you've had a really busy month and a really busy time right now, but it's important that we talk about what's been going on and what your family wants to let people know about, and to say, where do we go from here?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on your show and for your work in getting the truth out to your listeners. That's a key role in fighting this battle. So I really appreciate your hard work and all the other individuals who are on your team. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
And first of all, I would like to just communicate who my dad was. He was a true cowboy. Much of his growing up years was spent riding horses and hunting, and his whole life he was active in church. He served a 2-year mission and also held a lot of other ecclesiastical positions. He loved family, hence the reason we have 11 children in our family. And most importantly, he was a God-fearing man, and his God was what motivated a lot of his decisions and actions and character development. And for those of your listeners who may be new to the LaVoy Finicum murder story, I want them to understand that this began years ago as he practiced daily diligence in the things that developed his mind, his body, and his spirit. And such practices enabled him to be the powerful voice that America now knows him to be. The more that he studied history and law and the scriptures even, he began to realize how tyranny was intimately involved in the lives of the American people, including himself, and because he was a man of principle, this weighed on his soul, and he could not in good conscience just stand idly by. And so he decided to cancel all contracts with the Bureau of Land Management in regard to his management of his ranch, because he recognized how the Bureau of Land Management was a department of government that was federally overreaching into people's lives. They were unelected bureaucrats who I'm sure, I'm preaching to the choir to you, but I don't know who your listeners are, but who,
it's important that everybody understands and has that brought up to them again. I think it's good for you to go over that.
Okay, well, the BLM regulates and dictates how people manage their own property rights, and that is unconstitutional. And my dad understood that, and that's why he canceled, kindly, respectfully, sent them a letter, followed the due process, and kindly said, I no longer need your assistance in managing my ranch. I will now take full responsibility in the management of my ranch. And thank you so much for your assistance, but I will now do it myself. He did it very kindly and respectfully. And you can follow that on YouTube. He documented the whole thing on YouTube so that America could watch his stand and hopefully gain courage to do so in their own sphere, in their own realm. And he got courage by watching the Bundy family doing the same thing. Anyhow, so that was the beginning of his journey, and I encourage all your listeners to follow that.
How long ago was that?
That was, I wish I had the date right in front of me. It was probably a year ago.
Okay.
He canceled those contracts with them, and of course they harassed him and sent him letters. If you don't do this, you will be fined. And then they just kept sending him letters. You are now fined this, and you are now fined that. And he has that all documented on his YouTube channel. So I encourage everybody to go watch that. But our family wants the world to know who he was, what he was doing, and why he was doing it, because there's a huge misunderstanding on property rights and how the grass on that ranch is a property right. He owned it. The BLM had no right or jurisdiction or authority to tell him when his cows could and could not be eating the grass that he purchased, not from the BLM, but from the previous owner. So that was a hard line in the sand that he drew. And as far as what was going on in Oregon, he would follow closely the oppression of other ranchers, because that's where he felt he can effectively help others in defending their property rights, because that's exactly what he was doing. And so he was following the Hammond story, and he was just disgusted and overwhelmed at the injustice inflicted upon the Hammond family in Burns, Oregon. And so he decided to attend the peaceful protest on January 2nd in support of the Hammond family, who had been sentenced double jeopardy on top of $400,000 in fines, a clear violation of the Eighth Amendment, not to mention how the family was forced to give right of first refusal of their ranch to the Bureau of Land Management. So, in other words, in layman terms, they regulated them, they fined them large amounts of money to where it was almost impossible to pay, to force them into bankruptcy, to lose their ranch. And not only could they sell it to the people that they wanted to, they were forced to first offer it to the BLM. So it's
right. That's some good
really
background. We're going to a break. I apologize. I don't mean to cut you off. But I think some of the things that we need to look at, again, is people think, that you have the liberals calling the Bundys and your dad and others welfare ranchers. But what they don't understand is what you brought out is that it was their land. It was the things that they purchased that were a part of it. And this unconstitutional agency comes along and tries to tell them how to manage it. And so we'll talk more about that when we get back from the break with Tara Tenney, the daughter of assassinated protester LaVoy Finicum. I am Ben McClintock with my co-host
Enoch Moore
from defendingutah.org. This is the Naked Truth segment of the Liberty Lineup Radio Show, where you think right and wrong, not right and left. Be right back after the break. This is Ben McClintock with Enoch Moore of defendingutah.org, back on KTalk Radio AM630, k-talk.com, with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment every Thursday, 10 to noon, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. Sponsored by Patriot Mobile. People are asking us how they can join our grassroots network. To get our updates and alerts, just go to libertylineup.com. That's libertylineup.com and sign up. And if you like what you're hearing, you can support the cause of liberty with a donation of any amount. That's libertylineup.com. You can also like and share our Facebook page, the Liberty Lineup Radio Show. And we are speaking with Tenney, who is the daughter of assassinated rancher and protester LaVoy Finicum. Thanks again for joining us, Tara.
Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate being able to speak to your listeners.
Yeah, we're glad to have you be able to talk to people. It's important for them to hear what you're talking about. Before we went to the break, we were talking about how much your father studied what the Founding Fathers taught, studied what the principles of the Constitution were, and what it laid out, and what it said that the government could and could not do. And another thing I wanted to kind of emphasize again is you talked about who your father really was, and how he was willing to put his money where his mouth is, so to say. You know, he was walking the walk, not just talking the talk. How he sent the letter off to the BLM telling them that they couldn't tell him how to control his land anymore. I think that's something that because there's a narrative out there that's saying that these people are welfare ranchers, that they're just mooching off of the government, when it's actually the other way around, that it's this unconstitutional agency telling people what to do with their own land. Can you maybe expound upon that a little more?
Yes. He canceled all of his contracts with the Bureau of Land Management. And not only did he say that he did no longer need their management, and that it was federal overreach to have them regulate him, but he did say that he was going to be paying a production tax to his county so that his production could further the success and prosperity of his county. And so that production tax of 3% that he said that he was going to be paying was actually a higher fee than what he was paying to the BLM. So anybody who claims that they're freeloaders, it's comical, really.
It's frankly ridiculous, and it's not factual by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. And I wanted to just go back to what they were doing in Oregon.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
Yes.
The narrative was that they were terrorists and that they were, guns ablazing, and that's comical to me too, because I know who my dad is, and that's so far from the truth. The Cowboys were peacefully participating in civil disobedience to petition the government for a redress of grievances, which is their First Amendment right.
Right.
And they were exercising their Second Amendment right to bear arms to protect themselves against a tyrannical government. Let's go back to the Bundy experience that happened just a few years ago that my dad was a part of. Let's ask, who was pointing guns at who in that experience?
Right.
Who was terrorizing who in that experience? Who was pepper spraying and tasing who in that experience? If it was
the ranchers, they would have been shot and imprisoned.
Yes,
but it was
and
the
guess
government.
what? The only reason why that was not a bloodbath is because there was rolling live cameras.
Right.
Documenting the whole experience. And so these men who were in that experience 2 years, or I don't know the exact date, I need to get that information down, but in the Bundy experience a few years ago, they're courageously now standing up to continual federal overreach in support of the Hammond family in Oregon. And wouldn't it be foolish of them, after experiencing the federal overreach and the abuse that they received over there, to not exercise their Second Amendment right while exercising their First Amendment right? That would just be foolish, because they would have been taken out, not taken seriously, and treated the same way that they were over there in Bundyville. And so in regard to the people who say, they shouldn't have taken their guns and it escalated the situation, well, that's my response to that.
Well, a right not exercised is a right lost, and everyone at all times has the right to exercise their Second Amendment right. So it's even sillier to say they can't have it really any time. So it's really a mute argument.
Right, and my father, LaVoy Finicum, and the other cowboys were in no way what the media, the mainstream media, has characterized them to be. Their days in Oregon were spent with meeting with people, teaching people, welcoming them, giving ranchers who have been terrorized and threatened and bullied, giving them courage that they too can reclaim their property.
You know, I think that's really what you just said. What they were really doing was educating people. They were having Constitution classes. That's a common thing we see all around Utah and other states. People, you take out the library or in their homes, they teach Constitution classes to their neighbors. And ultimately, that's what your dad was doing on a larger scale. He was teaching these principles, and that's what made him a threat, was just teaching about our founding principles. And because he was teaching in a certain place where the people listening happened to the government wanted their land. And so it's not as big of a threat when we teach the Constitution at the library, in Salt Lake City, Utah, because those people aren't going to go and say, government, you can't have my land. But those people had assets that the government wanted, and they couldn't have them learning their rights.
And actually implying
Exactly.
them.
I couldn't have said that better myself. Often, in communicating with my mom, Dad would say, I have never taught so much in my entire life. Even when I was on my church mission, I have never taught as much as I am teaching now. I am on a teaching mission. And the day that my dad was assassinated, they were in transit to the neighboring county, Grant County. And the Grant County Sheriff, Glenn Palmer, had actually gathered a large number of his citizens into a facility to hear these cowboys' message of hope. And, well, we all know the story. They were in transit, and we've all seen the horrific scene of my father being gunned down with his hands in surrender up in the air. And it's significant to note that it's significant to note that Oregon's United States Senator Ron Wyden, if that's how you pronounce his last name,
Wyden,
stated, we have got to stop this virus before it spreads. Shortly before my father was murdered.
He called freedom a virus.
I asked you, what is this virus he's talking about? This virus is truth, enlightening the minds of the citizens to know what their rights actually are so that they can act instead of be acted upon.
Exactly.
So that they can have courage to stand up for their property rights. That's the virus that he was talking about, because it was threatening his purse, his dollar bill. Now,
and his power.
And his power, yeah. Also, Oregon Governor Kate Brown also made a statement that said, let me get to it. I have it written down because I don't have it memorized yet. You'll have to forgive me.
That's fine. I think it's important that as you're looking for that, for us to recognize what it is that these people are saying, that it's a threat to the power structure, to not just, we talk about being doers of the word and not hearers only. It's important that we understand. We need to know. We need to learn, but we need to apply what we've learned. Otherwise, it doesn't do anybody any good. And so that's what the big threat is when we start applying these principles. The Founding Fathers meeting together to discuss the ideas of liberty and of history didn't scare the crown. It was when they actually started applying those principles. And the state Senate, the U.S. Senator Wyden calling liberty a virus is very telling.
It's very telling. And I just found it, Oregon Governor Kate Brown boldly invoking authorities a few days before my father's murder by saying, the bottom line is that federal authorities must move quickly to end this occupation and to hold all these wrongdoers accountable. Now, and then she further goes on and says, because the situation is absolutely intolerable. Now, let's just review what Governor Kate Brown's responsibility is. It is her duty to hear the people's petition to the government for a redress of grievances.
Right.
It is her duty to tolerate and hear such redress. The fact that she's calling them wrongdoers and how their conduct is absolutely intolerable, that's also very telling.
It's wrongdoing to apply the Constitution and enforce it, according to the people in power now. Which means they're totally illegitimate. And the people that they're putting in jail, it's interesting. I've looked at the charges. One of the charges that they're being that are being put against some of the people that are in prison in Oregon now is that Pete Santilli was being charged with conspiracy because he was reporting on what was going on there. So that means that actually people like us as well could be charged if they wanted to. Anybody that reported to a mass group of people of what was happening up there could be charged as a co-conspirator because these people do not want the virus of liberty to spread.
The virus of liberty, yeah. It sickens me. I'm sorry. It just sickens me.
It's unbelievable he called it a virus. Think for a second what he called a virus. He's saying liberty is a virus. You know, liberty, many people talk about, that's the spirit of freedom. And many people say the spirit of freedom is the same as the spirit of Christ. So that's really what he's calling a virus, right? It tells you where these people come from.
Well, they are antichrist for sure. And I think that's something that we need to talk about as well, if you feel comfortable, is the religious foundation that inspired your father as well. It wasn't just the founding fathers. There was a conviction to follow the teachings of the Savior that led him to do these things. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, I would love to. My father, as well as his wife and all of his children, I can only speak for us. I can't speak for his, I understand his siblings and where they stand, but I'm not going to speak for them. But I know where I stand, and I know where my dad stood, and that is Jesus Christ is the true author of liberty in every constituent, in every way that it can be. My father took great courage and comfort from a quote by Ezra Taft Benson, and it says, "The fight for freedom is God's fight." So when a man stands for freedom, he stands with God. And as long as he stands for freedom, he stands with God. And were he to stand alone, he would still stand with God. A man will be eternally vindicated and rewarded for his stand for freedom. So this concept of freedom was intimately interwoven into every aspect of who my father was, and so it is with myself as his daughter, and so it is with my siblings and my mother. It is who we are. It is our way of life, and we cannot and will not be silenced. And I wanted to just touch on something that this generation is suffering from. We have enjoyed this liberty, but never have had to pay the price that liberty costs. Now, liberty requires a willingness to stand for it, a willingness to suffer for it, and a willingness to even die for it. And that is exactly what my father did. He understood this the way that most Americans now, in my generation, and even in the previous generation, don't fully understand.
Right.
Because liberty has to be won, and it has to be established and maintained. My father was so good at bringing it down to layman terms, and he talked about property rights and how he likened it unto a line. Have you guys ever heard him talk about that?
I haven't. I've heard him talk about property rights on many occasions, but I don't remember the lime analogy. And
we've just got a minute. Can we do that, and then we've got to move on to the next segment. But go ahead and just finish that real quick.
Well, he talked about how property rights have to be created, used. You have to use it, and it has to be defended.
Right.
So it is with our liberty, and he likened it unto a line. We show up to a place, we get in line. We created our right to be first in line.
Yes, I've heard that. Yep. Keep going.
And so it becomes our preemptive right. The legal term is prior appropriation. Our founding fathers would call it self-evident or the natural law. I am first in line because I was here first. The second thing is you have to use that right. If you decide, oh, it's cold, I want to go sit down over there. Once you move from the first in line, you lose your right to be first in line.
Right.
Okay? And then you have to defend it. Say you're first in line, and this big guy comes, and he's kind of a bully, and he pushes you aside and says, I'm now first in line. You have a choice. You can either choose to cower down and walk to the back of the line and lose your right to be first in line, or you can say, no, that's not right. I was here first. And then maybe you get some other people that were in the line to say, yeah, she was here first. That's not right. And then you defend your right to be first in line. And I could go further into detail on how that metaphor, if you will, applies to the grass property right for ranchers, or how it applies to the concept of liberty. But I know we only had a minute, so I don't know.
We've got that up. But I appreciate you coming on, and I hate to just cut you off there. This is important to go after. I would like to have you on regularly just to be able to come on and talk about the things that your father talked about and that he wanted to put forward. But this is Thara Tenney, who is the daughter of assassinated rancher and protester LaVoy Finicum. I highly recommend everybody go and pick up LaVoy's book, Only by Blood and Suffering, and Regaining Lost Freedom. And you can get it on Amazon, or you can get it at the family's website, right, Thara?
Yes.
OneCowboysStandForFreedom.com. OneCowboysStandForFreedom.com. I don't know if you've got a preference of which way they go, but I really hope everybody gets that.
We would prefer you to go through the website, and it's singular, One Cowboy.
Oh, I'm sorry, One Cowboy Stand for Freedom. One Cowboy Stand for Freedom. Pick up that book, Only by Blood and Suffering. My family's been reading it. It's been huge. Thank you, Thara. Appreciate you coming on. And I hope we can talk to you again soon. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore from defendingutah.org. And this is The Naked Truth, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. We'll be right back talking about some of the things in the legislature right now. They're actually working on a bill that will actually increase the power of the federal government. And we need to know what we can do about it. Right back.